The project. Origin. Note: any reference to personal names, places, events, historical facts, whether they really existed or exist, is to be considered simply coincidental. Preface. What does it mean to pursue an idea, make it concrete and carry it forward? What does entrepreneurial success really imply? Is it possible to build something even in the midst of a global pandemic? The reader will find all the answers to these questions in this novel, which is basically the story of an ordinary boy who, like many others, leaves the nest to chase a dream. But his perseverance, the ability to grasp the positive even in a hostile environment and in a disastrous economic social condition, are undoubtedly inspiring. Our protagonist, in short, creates his own destiny, as a recurring maxim in the project Origin states, but, unlike his colleagues, he does not change his personality, preserving his sensitivity and honesty. This, however, is only a story of non-entrepreneurial successors. Frank, because this is the name of the protagonist, meets true love, the one with Elise, a very important support figure and decisive in many moments, cultivates deep friendships and overcomes many of his fears and insecurities that he carries with him since high school. A coming-of-age novel that accompanies the reader in the personal and professional growth of the protagonist, a true example of how success can be achieved with the right will. In the background, what better city than New York, a symbol par excellence of hope and opportunity? Introduction. In the American temperament there is a quality, called resiliency, which embraces the concepts of elasticity, rebound, resource, and good humor. A girl loses her patrimony, without being commensurate, she will start washing dishes and making hats. A student will not feel debased by working a few hours in a garage or a cafe. I saw America at the end of the Hoover presidency, in one of the most tragic hours in its history, when all the banks had shut down and economic life was at a standstill. Anguish gripped hearts, but happiness and confidence shone in everyone's faces. Listening to the phrases they exchanged, one would have said that it was all a huge joke. And if some financier threw itself out the window, I can't help believing it did so in the deceptive hope of bouncing back. Paul Claudel. The book aims to describe the concept of resilience, a concept that indicates the ability to deal positively with difficult events, to positively reorganize one's life in the face of difficulties, to rebuild oneself while remaining sensitive to the positive opportunities that life offers, without alienating one's own identity. The story tells about a boy who will find himself managing a reality that he could not expect or predict, thanks to the resilience he has shown in various complex and difficult life situations. Synopsis. Frank Connor is a guy from New Brunswick, a small town in the eastern United States, a stone's throw from New York. He wants to make his life a success, but Frank discovers his destiny only when he arrives in Manhattan, within the Florence Pharm Group, a multinational pharmaceutical company, where he is hired as an accountant. From here he starts his professional history, between political and economic subterfuges, extricating himself between obstacles and obstructions of the powerful. Frank's aim is to revolutionize the New York and global business landscape, setting up an economic system that is both imperial and ethical. Along his path he will be faced with numerous battles to win, some apparently insurmountable, others unavoidable. And all with one goal, to complete his project Origin. Chapter I. The beginning of an unexpected journey. At first glance, Frank could say that he had managed very well. It had been a long 5 years in high school, dismayed with difficulties that were more psychological than financial, but in the end he had really made it. He had been told all along, after all, you make your own destiny. Frank had believed it. Or, rather, he really hoped he would. Above all, he hoped it would be so in the future. New Brunswick had watched him grow up, with its buildings sometimes anonymous, sometimes dense with meaning, sometimes still searching for a meaning that even Frank did not know what it might be among those lost gazes, between the eyes of frightened windows. A town enclosed by invisible boundaries that nevertheless had the virtue of making young minds dream. Several times he had wandered off along the Raritan River, or through the great city streets, in search of meaning to his wandering. He, a meticulous person, loved to get lost, just for the sake of finding himself. And New Brunswick was the ideal place to do that, for, in fact, among those streets you could not for a moment get lost. In the distance, there were the New York skyscrapers that attracted him. Until he was 18, however, he never went beyond Raritan, perhaps because he never had the right excuse to do so, or that interest that leads you to say that's where you really want to go. In New Brunswick, on the other hand, he had everything he needed, or at least that was what he had been told since he was born: his family, his parents' jobs, his friends. In his life there were only the neighborhoods of New Brunswick with their own smallness, the same streets, the same friendships, the same looks to cross, the same habits to which he would soon become accustomed. New York was there, a stone's throw away, but on the horizon it would remain for a long time to come. He saw it, touched it, almost dreamed of it. More than the city, it was what Manhattan represented in him that attracted him: the fascination for the economy, for work, the euphoria for beautiful things, the desire to cross the infinite. Frank was a quiet, friendly guy who was just the right amount of meticulous. He didn't like to meddle in affairs that didn't concern him, just as he preferred to stay out of circles that were not inclined to his aptitudes. He dressed well, he had always done so, but not to be conspicuous, but rather out of a personal ambition that, at the same time, concealed respect for his own person. It was his mother who had taught him this, and he had never lost his taste for beautiful things since then. He took care of his physical appearance from a young age, thus forging a character that was shy, but at the same time talkative and friendly with intimate people. Frank could give his all to people who loved him, but he was also capable of staying away for years from those who even remotely hinted at some feeling of discontent. Of friends he had, mostly high school friends. For Frank, however, none of them would be worth remembering in the years to come. Although there was a kinship with some of his classmates, Frank was sure that by the end of high school they would all be lost and each would go straight for his or her own way. Rather than thinking about others, therefore, Frank had wondered many times what path might be reserved for him. Fine family, friendships, and regular attendance at state schools, but then when he came of age, the choice about which path to take would be his alone. After the age of 18, in other words, Frank would be called upon to unravel his doubts, to figure out, in short, what turn to take in his life. And it was almost time to do so. Until then it was his parents who had directed him in everything he did, first elementary school, then middle school, then high school. He had never been a boy capable of imposing himself or his choices, from an early age, because of his hopeless reserve. As long as he was not the center of attention, he relied on others. It was almost a choice of convenience for him at first to delegate his decisions. It freed him from responsibilities he did not like to shoulder. His parents, moreover, had never given him any reason to doubt the choices he was making. Even in the name of others, he gave for certain that they were the most appropriate ones for him. His mother, a lawyer, had always demanded and gotten everything she wanted from life, albeit at extreme sacrifice. She had known how to struggle and had taught her son to do the same, but in his own way, only when he would be ready to enter the fray and give life to his own illusions. His father, on the other hand, a scatterbrained scientific researcher for a major industrial group in New Brunswick, wanted only a scientific education for his son, the only one, in his opinion, capable of building an open-minded outlook, which he had had only partially. Consequently, Frank, trusting his parents, who wanted nothing more than for their son to be better than they had been in the past, had never opposed their decisions, for and on behalf of his life. His character over time was forged of shyness and fastidiousness, mixed with just the right amount of tenderness. As the years progressed, Frank gradually became aware of what he was and what, one day, he wanted to become. His first opportunity to assert his own ideals over his father's was when it came to deciding which high school path to take. There was a discussion in the house about which address suited Frank best. "I'm not interested in linguistics, Dad," What do you mean?